It was a rainy evening when I heard the faint knock on the door. The kind of night when the sky weeps longer than people do. I almost ignored it. No one visits an old woman after dark. But then came another knock, softer, desperate, trembling. When I opened the door, the porch light flickered across a small face, tear-streaked, frightened, familiar. My heart stopped. It was my grandson. The boy I hadn't seen in 3 years. His clothes were wet, his tiny hands clutching a worn-out teddy bear I'd given him long ago. "Grandma," he whispered through his sobs. "Mom said I can't come here." But I had nowhere else to go. The rain swallowed my tears as I pulled him into my arms. And in that moment, I knew. Whatever peace I'd made with the past was about to be shattered once again. Before the silence, there was laughter. Before the bans and bitterness, there were Sunday dinners filled with warmth, the smell of baked bread, and the sound of my son's laughter echoing through the house. My son Daniel was my pride. A kind-hearted man who'd grown up watching me struggle after his father passed away. He used to say, "Mom, one day I'll make sure you never have to worry again." And he did. When he married Lily, a beautiful, confident woman, I thought my family was finally complete. In the early days, Lily was sweet to me. She'd ask for recipes, bring me flowers, and smile every time she called me Mom. When she gave birth to little Ethan, I was in the hospital room, holding her hand. I still remember the smell of that newborn, a mix of milk, powder, and miracle. That baby filled every corner of my world, but time changes people in ways we don't expect. After Daniel got promoted, their life became faster. Bigger house, new friends, business trips. And with each change, I noticed Lily pulling away. Small things at first. She stopped calling, skipped family dinners, forgot birthdays. Then one day she simply said, "We're too busy right now, maybe next month," when I asked to see Ethan. I told myself it was just life. People get busy, mothers-in-law must give space. But deep down I felt something slipping away. It began with excuses and ended with a wall I could no longer climb. At first, Lily claimed Ethan was napping or sick or too busy with school. But children grow quickly, and months turned into years. Each missed visit felt like a small death, quiet, invisible, but deeply real. I tried everything a mother could. I sent gifts, small sweaters I knitted by hand, storybooks I thought he'd love, birthday cards filled with gentle words. None were ever acknowledged. Once I even drove across town to surprise them with a homemade cake for his 3rd birthday. Lily opened the door halfway, smiled tightly, and said, "Oh, we're just about to leave. Sorry." I saw the car waiting in the driveway. Daniel in the driver's seat, Ethan buckled in the back, a tiny face staring out the window. When he saw me, his little hand rose in a hesitant wave. Before I could wave back, Lily closed the door. That night, I cried harder than I had in years. Not because of what she did, but because my son said nothing. Daniel, who once called me every night before bed, stood silent. He chose peace over his mother, and I couldn't blame him. Perhaps that's what marriage demands. But I couldn't forgive it either. The final break came 2 winters later. I received a cold, formal message from Lily. "Please stop coming over without notice. Ethan is adjusting to a routine and your visits confuse him. We'll reach out when it's appropriate." They never did, so I learned to live in quiet routines, watering plants, feeding birds, and talking to photographs. Sometimes I'd drive past their house just to see the light in Ethan's room. It was my only proof he still existed in my world. Then, one evening, my neighbor mentioned seeing Daniel and Lily at a cafe, laughing, holding hands, like nothing had ever happened. That night I stared at the ceiling and wondered if I had been erased completely. And yet, life has a cruel way of circling back, because the moment you stop waiting is often when the door you gave up on finally knocks. That knock came on a rainy night, the night my grandson came back to me, cold, scared, and alone. It was just after 10 p.m. when I heard the knock, soft at first, hesitant, like a whisper. At my age, unexpected sounds in the night bring more fear than curiosity. But something in that rhythm, it was small, familiar, desperate. When I opened the door, I froze. There, drenched in the cold rain, stood Ethan. My little boy, though not so little anymore, clutching a worn backpack to his chest. His lips trembled as he said the words I never imagined I'd hear again. "Grandma, can I stay here?" For a moment I couldn't breathe. My heart stumbled, my knees weakened, and all the air seemed to leave the room. He was taller now, maybe 8 or 9, but those same hazel eyes still carried Daniel's gentleness. I pulled him into my arms before I could think. He was shivering, his jacket soaked through, his fingers icy against my neck. When I asked what happened, he hesitated. Then, in the smallest voice, he whispered, "Mom said I was a bad boy, that you don't love me either." That sentence broke something inside me. I guided him to the sofa, wrapped him in a blanket, and made him warm milk like I used to for Daniel. As he drank slowly, he began to talk. He told me about the arguments, how Lily would fight with Daniel, always mentioning me. How she called me toxic, controlling, and obsessed with the past. She said I was trying to turn Ethan against her, though I hadn't seen him in years. Ethan said she'd started locking away gifts that had my name on them. She told him, "Grandma doesn't want to see you anymore. She's too busy with her own life," and he believed her, until the lies began to unravel. One day, he found one of my unopened letters, the same ones I mailed on every birthday. It had been hidden inside a drawer in his room. He said he read it over and over. I had written, "You are always loved, no matter what anyone tells you." That's when he realized the truth. He packed his bag, waited until Lily was asleep, and ran out the back door, in the middle of the storm. He walked nearly 2 miles before finding my house. I sat beside him, silent tears falling. Anger burned quietly beneath the sorrow, not the wild, vengeful kind, but the kind that sits deep and old. Like coals that never cool, because this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about a child who had been made to feel unloved, weaponized in a war he never started, and for the first time in years, I realized. This wasn't simply a misunderstanding. This was betrayal, not from a stranger, but from within my own family. By morning, the rain had stopped, but the storm inside me hadn't. Ethan was still asleep on the couch, curled up in the old knitted blanket I'd made for Daniel when he was small. I watched his chest rise and fall, fragile, peaceful, unaware that the world outside was about to explode. It didn't take long for the doorbell to ring again. This time, louder, sharper, almost angry. When I opened it, there stood Daniel. His hair was soaked with sweat and rain, his eyes wide with panic. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then his gaze darted past me, and he saw Ethan sleeping. He exhaled, part relief, part exhaustion. "Thank God," he murmured. "We've been looking everywhere. That one word sliced through me. Where's Lily?" I asked. "In the car," he said quietly. She's not herself right now." I wanted to ask what that meant, but before I could, Lily's voice echoed from the driveway, shrill, shaking with fury. "Daniel! Don't just stand there. Bring him back right now!" Ethan stirred at the sound. He sat up, rubbing his eyes, confusion clouding his face. When he saw his parents through the window, his little hands clutched my arm. "Please, Grandma, don't let them take me." And in that moment, I made a silent promise. I wouldn't. Not until I understood what was truly happening. Daniel stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. His voice trembled with exhaustion. "Mom, please. Lily's been having a hard time. She thinks you're trying to turn Ethan against her. She's not thinking clearly. She's hurting him," I said, quietly but firmly. He froze. "What?" I showed him Ethan's soaked shoes, his trembling hands, the fear in his eyes when he heard his mother's voice. "This is not a misunderstanding, Daniel. Your son ran through a storm because he thought no one loved him, because your wife told him that." Daniel's face paled. His voice cracked as he turned toward the window, where Lily now stood glaring from the car. "I'll handle this," he whispered, but the truth was already unraveling. That evening, Daniel came back alone. He sat across from me, silent, hollow. Finally, he spoke. "She's been seeing someone," he said quietly. "It's been going on for months. Every time she fought with you, it wasn't really about you. It was about her guilt. I stared at him, not in shock, but in quiet recognition. I had felt it all along. The deflection, the projection, the cruelty that came from shame. She used you as the villain, Daniel continued, voice breaking. And I let her. Because it was easier than facing the truth. He buried his face in his hands. I wanted to hate him, but all I felt was an old ache. A mother's ache for a son who had lost himself. Outside, the wind carried a soft rattle of rain against the windows, the same sound that had accompanied Ethan's arrival. The storm had passed, but its memory stayed, and though I had Ethan in my arms again, I knew this was far from over. Because when betrayal comes from the ones who share your blood, forgiveness isn't a single act. It's a war of its own. The days that followed were the hardest of my life. After Daniel's confession, silence filled the spaces that once held our laughter. He left that night without Ethan, promising he'd figure things out, but I could see the weight in his eyes. He was torn between guilt and fear, between truth and the ruins of his marriage. I tucked Ethan into bed, humming an old lullaby I used to sing to Daniel when he was little. He clung to my arm, whispering, "Grandma, can I stay forever?" And though my heart wanted to say yes, I knew the world doesn't always honor what hearts want. The next morning, Lily came. No announcement, no apology, just the sharp screech of tires outside and the slam of the car door that made Ethan flinch from the kitchen table. When I opened the door, her eyes were red, not from crying, but from fury. "You think you can just take him from me?" she hissed. I stayed calm. "He came on his own, Lily. You should be asking why." For a moment, something cracked in her expression, a flicker of shame. But it vanished as quickly as it came. "You've poisoned him against me. Ever since the beginning, you've wanted him to hate me." "No," I said softly. "I only ever wanted him to feel loved." The word loved seemed to sting her like salt on an open wound. She turned her face away, trembling, then stormed toward Ethan's room. He hid behind the bed when she tried to touch him. That sight broke something in both of us. She froze, her hand hovering midair. For the first time, her anger looked hollow, like armor built to hide something fragile underneath. She whispered almost to herself, "He used to run to me like that. Now he runs from me." I didn't speak. I just watched her shoulders shake as she knelt by the bed. She looked small, the kind of smallness that comes not from height but from heartbreak. Then she left, without another word. For days, Ethan stayed quiet. He drew pictures of a family holding hands, but with one person always missing. When I asked him who it was, he said, "Mommy, she's gone somewhere dark." I didn't know how to answer that. At night, I sat by the window with a cup of cold tea, watching the empty streetlights flicker. I wondered where I had gone wrong, not as a mother-in-law, but as a mother. Had I raised Daniel to choose peace over truth, to mistake control for love? The house felt heavier every day. Even Ethan's laughter, when it came, sounded like an echo of what once was. Then one afternoon, Daniel called. His voice was low, tired. "She's checked herself into a clinic," he said. She wants to get better." For a moment, I didn't know whether to feel relief or sorrow. Because behind every act of cruelty, there's often a brokenness we never see. And perhaps Lily had finally seen hers. That night, I looked at Ethan asleep on the couch again, clutching the same blanket. I realized the struggle wasn't just mine. It was his, too, learning that love could hurt, and that adults, even the ones who should protect him, could fail him. The descent wasn't about losing peace. It was about finding meaning in the ruins. It had been nearly 3 weeks since Lily entered the clinic. The house was quieter now, too quiet sometimes. Ethan had started talking again, asking questions that no child should ever have to ask. "Grandma, why did Mommy stop loving me?" Each time, I swallowed the lump in my throat and answered the only way I knew how. "She never stopped loving you, sweetheart." Sometimes, people forget how to show it. He would nod, pretending to understand, but I could see the confusion in his little eyes. How could love and pain come from the same place? Daniel visited often, though each visit seemed to add a new wrinkle to his face. He'd sit at the kitchen table staring into his coffee. "I should have stopped her," he'd say quietly. "I thought if I just stayed calm, she'd calm down too. But silence doesn't heal madness, does it, Mom?" "No," I told him. "Silence feeds it." He nodded slowly, guilt heavy on his shoulders. It was strange. The son I once scolded for breaking vases and staying out too late was now a man broken by his own mistakes. And yet there was still a flicker of the boy I raised, buried beneath the fatigue. Sometimes I wondered if forgiveness was just another form of love, the kind you give even when you have nothing left. One evening, Ethan found an old photo album on the shelf. He flipped through it, pointing at a picture of Daniel and Lily on their wedding day. "They were smiling," he said. "Did Mommy love Daddy then?" "She did," I whispered. "Then why did she yell so much?" I paused. "Because sometimes people love with fear instead of kindness. They think they'll lose everything if they stop controlling it." He frowned. "That's not love." And in that moment, my grandson, barely 7, understood something most adults never do. That night, after he fell asleep, I sat on the porch alone. The moon hung low over the street, pale and forgiving. The air was thick with the smell of rain again, just like the night Ethan came to me. I thought of Lily, how her anger was really pain in disguise, how she built walls out of shame and called them boundaries. And I thought of Daniel, how he had inherited his father's silence, mistaking endurance for strength. Maybe that was my fault too. I had always told him, "Be patient, son. Love is tested most when it hurts." But I never told him that love also needs courage, the kind that speaks up when silence becomes cruelty. For the first time in weeks, I let myself cry. Not out of sadness, but because I finally understood something I had been avoiding. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's surrender, not to the person who wronged you, but to peace itself. The struggle wasn't between me and Lily anymore. It was within me, between the urge to cling to resentment and the will to let it go. By the time the sun rose, my heart felt lighter, though my eyes were swollen from tears. I decided that if Lily ever came back, I wouldn't meet her with anger. I'd meet her with truth, quiet, unwavering, and human. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when the doorbell rang again. Ethan was in the living room building a puzzle, humming to himself, and I was folding laundry by the window. The chime startled us both, not because it was unexpected, but because deep down I knew who it was. When I opened the door, there she stood. Lily, her once perfect hair was now tied loosely behind her head, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. She looked smaller than I remembered, like a shadow of the proud woman who had once slammed that same door in my face. "Hi," she said softly, voice trembling. "May I come in?" For a moment I hesitated. Memories of her cruelty, the shouting, the accusations, the loneliness she had inflicted, flickered through my mind. But then I looked closer. Her eyes weren't burning anymore. They were searching for mercy, for belonging, perhaps even for forgiveness. I stepped aside. Of course, she entered slowly, as though stepping into holy ground she no longer deserved to touch. The sound of Ethan's humming stopped. When he saw her, his face froze, part fear, part confusion. Lily knelt down. "Hey, baby," she whispered. "I've missed you so much." Ethan didn't answer. He clutched the edge of the couch cushion and stared at me, seeking permission, protection, maybe both. "It's okay," I said gently. He walked to her, cautious, like approaching a wounded animal. Lily's tears fell the moment his little arms wrapped loosely around her. That was the real turning point, not revenge through cruelty, but through conscience. Seeing her break before the innocence she had once hurt was justice enough. We sat together in silence for a long time. Finally, Lily spoke. "I wanted to hate you," she said quietly. "It made it easier to live with what I did. But you were never the problem, were you?" "No," I said softly. "The problem was the hurt you carried. It just spilled on the wrong people," she nodded, eyes wet, hands trembling in her lap. "I'm sorry for everything. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I had to say it." Her words didn't sound rehearsed. They sounded raw, The kind of apology that comes when you've stared too long into your own reflection. I looked at her for a long moment before answering. Lily, forgiveness isn't about deserving. It's about freeing the heart that's been bleeding too long. She looked down, silent. Then she whispered, I don't know how to fix what I broke. You start by not pretending it didn't happen, I said. Ethan sat between us, playing with his toy car, unaware that this quiet conversation was rebuilding something. Fragile, but real. That evening, as Lily left, she turned to me at the door. Thank you for letting me see him, she said. Thank him, I replied softly. He's the one who showed us both what love still looks like. As she drove away, I realized that the true revenge wasn't her pain. It was her awakening. Because nothing humbles the cruel like their own reflection in the eyes of an innocent child. A week later, the past knocked again, this time in the shape of Daniel. It was evening, the sky draped in orange and violet, when I saw his car pull up in front of the house. I could see his reflection through the kitchen window, older, thinner, guilt stitched across his face like scars that never healed. He stood on the porch for a long time before knocking, holding a small paper bag in one hand, the kind Ethan loved for his lunch at school. My heart thudded quietly. I opened the door. Hi, Mom, he said, voice small, almost fragile. Daniel. The word tasted bitter and sweet at the same time. I hadn't spoken it in months. He shifted awkwardly. Can I come in? I nodded and stepped aside. The air between us was thick with unspoken apologies. When Ethan saw his father, he froze, not with fear, but with the innocent confusion of a child trying to understand betrayal. Daniel knelt beside him. Hey, champ, he said, voice trembling. I brought you something. He pulled out a small wooden plane, hand-carved, painted in bright blue. Ethan took it silently, eyes fixed on the gift. Then, without saying a word, he stood and went to his room. Daniel exhaled, his hands covering his face. I deserve that. Yes, I said quietly. You do, he looked up, eyes glistening. I don't expect forgiveness, Mom. I can't sleep knowing what I did to you, to Lily, to my own son. I thought I was teaching everyone a lesson, about control, about respect, but I only destroyed what loved me most. I looked at him, my son, the boy I once rocked to sleep, now a man carrying the ruins of his own choices. Daniel, I said softly, sometimes life doesn't punish us by taking things away. It punishes us by letting us live long enough to understand the damage we've done. Tears rolled down his cheeks. I know. Then unexpectedly, Lily appeared at the doorway. She had come by earlier that day to bring Ethan's favorite cookies. When she saw Daniel, the air cracked. Tension, shame, regret, all colliding in one silent glance. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Lily whispered, Daniel. He stood there, unable to meet her eyes. I never meant for it to go that far. I was angry and stupid and selfish, she finished. You wanted to teach everyone a lesson, but you forgot who was supposed to learn. They stood like that, two broken souls facing the mirror of their mistakes. I turned away, letting the silence speak for me. Sometimes words ruin what truth can fix on its own. Ethan's voice broke the quiet. He peeked from his room, clutching the blue plane. Dad, he said softly, can you make another one? This one's lonely. Daniel's lips quivered. He knelt down and pulled his son close, sobbing quietly into his hair. Yes, son, I'll make another one. I promise. Lily watched, tears gliding down her cheeks, not from jealousy, but release. That night, when everyone had left, I sat alone on the porch. The stars hung above me like witnesses to years of pain finally being laid to rest. I realized something profound. Revenge wasn't making them suffer. Revenge was making them face the truth and live with it. Forgiveness wasn't weakness. It was the final blow that broke the chain of hate. As I closed my eyes, I whispered to myself, he cheated to teach me a lesson. But I taught him one he'll never forget, that love and pain can't coexist in the same home. The months that followed unfolded in quiet shades of healing. No grand gestures, no cinematic reconciliations, just small, hesitant steps toward something that resembled peace. Daniel began visiting on weekends, not as a husband returning to claim what he lost, but as a father trying to rebuild what he broke. Each visit was careful, respectful, and often wordless. He'd sit on the living room floor, helping Ethan with puzzles or building toy planes, both of them concentrating so deeply that even silence seemed sacred. Lily and I found our own rhythm, too. She still didn't step into my house often, but she no longer avoided me. Once a week she'd call, sometimes to ask how Ethan was doing, sometimes to share a recipe or a story from work. Her voice carried less venom now, more weariness than anger. One afternoon she came over unannounced, holding a small tin box. "It's for you," she said, placing it on my kitchen table. Inside was a photo of me, Daniel, and Ethan from Ethan's first birthday. The edges were worn, but the smiles were pure. "I kept it," Lily said softly, "even when I didn't want to remember." I looked at her, the woman who once banned me from seeing my grandson, and saw not an enemy, but another mother who had loved and lost in her own way. "Thank you," I whispered. We sat together for an hour, sipping tea. The silence wasn't cold this time. It was full of shared exhaustion, forgiveness, and the faint sound of children's laughter coming from the garden. Later that evening, when Daniel came to pick Ethan up, Lily didn't look away. They spoke briefly, awkwardly, but civilly, like people learning to coexist in the ruins of something that once mattered. For the first time, I felt the tension in my chest ease. Sometimes justice doesn't come as thunder or fire. It comes as calm, the kind that follows after the storm, when you finally understand that peace is the loudest revenge of all. That night, I walked into Ethan's room. He was asleep holding the little blue plane. On his bedside table sat another, freshly carved, still smelling faintly of wood and varnish. Daniel had kept his promise. I sat on the edge of the bed, brushing Ethan's hair away from his forehead. In that quiet room, I realized something. Every generation carries its own mistakes, its own lessons. But maybe, just maybe, love, when tested, can evolve into something wiser. Years passed. Seasons changed quietly, and so did we. Ethan grew taller, stronger, and more curious about the world. He began spending weekends helping me in the garden, digging small holes for marigolds and chasing butterflies like he used to chase toy planes. The house that once echoed with loneliness now carried his laughter again, the kind of sound that can heal old wounds without even trying. Daniel rebuilt his life in small, humble steps. He didn't remarry. Instead, he poured himself into fatherhood, showing up for every school play, every soccer match, every bedtime story. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at Ethan with a tenderness that wasn't guilt anymore, but gratitude. A silent promise to do better. Lily too changed. The bitterness in her voice faded over the years. She began dropping Ethan off herself sometimes, standing by the door with a smile that no longer felt forced. One autumn afternoon, she stayed for dinner. It wasn't planned. She just sat at the table, helped serve soup, and laughed, genuinely, when Ethan spilled a little on his shirt. That laugh, light and unguarded, felt like the sound of forgiveness. I didn't need an apology. Life had already given me what I needed, a second chance to love without fear. When Ethan turned 13, he surprised me with a handmade gift. It was a small wooden plaque that read, "For Grandma, my first home." I remember holding it in my trembling hands, tears spilling before I could stop them. That moment reminded me why I had endured everything, the bands, the heartbreak, the long months of silence. It was all for this, for the love that found its way back despite everything that tried to destroy it. As the years rolled on, I grew older and slower, but not lonelier. Ethan visited every week, even when college and life pulled him in different directions. Daniel called me often just to ask how I was feeling. Lily would send me photos. Ethan's first car, his graduation, his job offer, and sometimes, on quiet evenings, I'd sit by the window with my tea and think back to that night. The night my grandson showed up at my door, crying. I had thought then that life had ended, but it hadn't. It had simply begun again, in a new way. Because sometimes life doesn't give you happy endings. It gives you earned peace. A peace built from pain, endurance, and the courage to love again after being broken. And that, I realized, is far more powerful than revenge ever could be. I often think about that stormy night, the knock on the door, the trembling little boy standing in the rain, and the sound of his voice calling, "Grandma." It's strange how life hides its biggest blessings behind the hardest trials. Back then, I thought I'd lost everything. My son's trust, my place in the family, my right to love freely. But what I didn't realize was that love isn't about permission. It's about endurance. It's about being there when others turn away. Ethan once asked me, "Grandma, how did you know I'd come back?" I smiled and told him, "Because love always finds its way home. It just takes the long road sometimes." Over the years, I learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace over pain, even when the wound still aches. It means letting time heal what pride once destroyed. When I look at Ethan now, grown, kind, and full of life, I see more than a grandson. I see the living proof that love, no matter how delayed, always returns to the ones who never stopped believing. So, if anyone ever tells you you're too old to start again, too broken to forgive, or too tired to love, tell them my story. Tell them that a grandmother once lost everything and still found her way back to love through tears, patience, and faith.